Restaurant Unstoppable, inspire, empower, and transform the industry. And with excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest. He is the author of The Surprise Restaurant Manager and the co-founder of Corrigan Hospitality. And his claim to fame is being on the Second City marquee during the book release of his book, The Surprise Restaurant Manager. Back on the show for a second time, Ken McGarrie. Ken, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Completely unstoppable. Great to see you again, Eric. How you been?
Dude, it is a pleasure to have you back. I'm doing great. This is your second time on the show, like we mentioned. If you guys want to go check out his first episode, head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/806. That's kind of Ken's come up story. We discussed how he got to where he is today, but today we're going deep into his book, which we mentioned in the first episode, but we really didn't pull back the layers on it. So we're going to kind of unpackage some of the elements of your book. We're going to be calling this the 6 rules for all first-time managers. And I cannot wait to dive in, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
You can do anything in this world that you're big enough to do.
You can do anything in this world that you're big enough to do. What do you mean?
Quick. So my first job out of college was writing for a newspaper in Southern Oklahoma. And the publisher was this incredibly gregarious, positive, straightforward person. But he also knew that he was the publisher of the only newspaper in the town. So when we went to go cover something in City Hall, he literally pulled up on the lawn. And I said, "Are you allowed to do that?" And his answer is, "You can do anything in the world that you're big enough to do." And I thought, I kind of like that. So
how does that speak to you? How do you use that mantra in your life?
It means that you have to bring a level of, yeah, I own this. I can do this. And it's not arrogance. It's not being immodest. It's, hey, if there's an ability to do this, I'm going to be the person to make that happen.
It's almost tricking yourself, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's telling yourself you can do it, even though you probably shouldn't, or maybe not be able to do it, but you tell yourself you can. So
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Way to get this thing started. So we're covering 6 rules for first-time managers. And before we get into it, just real quick, what was the reason for writing this book? I know we touched on it the first time around, but in case our listeners did not catch that episode, what is the Surprise Restaurant Manager?
Surprise Restaurant Manager is all of us. It's all of us that were bartenders or servers or hosts or security, and somebody handed you the keys and said, "Hey, do you mind locking up?" Or, "Hey, do you mind throwing out some drawers in the morning?" And the next thing you do, you're filling out schedules, and then you're managing people, and you find yourself in a management role with absolutely zero training. And the number of times I'm asked the same questions by managers that have never had any training force me to sit down and write all the questions I've ever been asked out and write all the things I wish I would have known.
Yes, and it's this reason right here why, the Restaurant Unstoppable's mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. When I say transform the industry, this is one of the things that comes to mind. We not only transform the industry, but transform the world. And one of the reasons why I think we have the ability to transform the world is because so many first-time managers were first-time managers in the restaurant industry. We really get to influence the next generation of professionals because their first experience to the workforce is the restaurant industry. We get to mold the next generation of professionals. And when I think of that, I mean, we get to inject values, we get to inject just business savviness. We have so much influence over the future. You know what I'm saying? And what's going through your mind as I'm saying this?
It's just the passion of why we do what we do. And if anything, in the last 18 months, the people that are still standing and the people that are still in this industry do it because they love it, do it because they're absolutely driven by the passion of it. And it reminds me why I chose to be in the restaurant industry. And so many people say, "Oh, I fell into it." But at some point, whether or not you admit it, you made a decision. And I'm reminded now often what it is that makes me so damn happy about being in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's also just having the mindset too that you're not just training a new manager, you're training, you're influencing the future. You know, whatever values, whatever habits, whatever standards you can inject into this person while they're still young and influential, or what's the word? Not influential, but easily influenced. There's a word for
Mhm.
that. There's another word.
Moldable, maybe,
Moldable.
or is
Uh
that a
I don't know. It'll come to me later, but I don't know. There's just a lot of power in this industry. And I want to make sure people are aware of that power that we have. And if we are aware of it, we can really be intentional with mentoring and sculpting the future. And I think that's something that we all just need to kind of be aware of. So with that said, we're going to be covering the 6 rules of first time managers. What is the first rule? Just take it away.
I wrote you're gonna have to read it out because I wrote it and I sent it to you. So give me my first one.
So I shorten these rules down
I
to
love it.
like a little height. Yeah.
See, this is
So
why I like you so much. You take my big long verbose stuff and you shrink it down. So
the
number
first
one.
rule, don't become an elitist. What do you mean by that?
Oh my gosh. The minute that you become a manager, there's a very good possibility that you are now managing people that you used to work alongside. And so everyone's looking at you like, why did you get this job? And you have to figure out how to be able to motivate people that 10 minutes ago you were working literally right alongside. And because of that because I said so, that elitist attitude is so easy to adopt. And you're not walking into a place to change the world 10 minutes after you start. You're walking in to realize how you're going to be able to make a difference. The best way that you can do that is keep your mouth shut, your ears open, and to try to keep your ego in check.
Yeah, that was a word that was like hovering in my head right there, is keeping your ego in check, not believing your hype or your success, because it will go to your head. So what things can you do? Are there any like checks and balances to keep you honest, to check your ego? What advice do you have?
The best way to check your ego is to realize that the less ego that you bring, the more results you ever have. The more times that I will go into a situation and ask for help or come into it with the idea of taking advice from anyone for any reason, that because a good answer could come from anywhere, is how I usually find the best answer. And it's rarely comes from me. If it comes from how to improve the server station, how to improve the busser schedule, whatever that is, I'm not the person who has the answer. The servers do, the busters do,
Mhm.
and you just become that person. But just because you got a title doesn't mean that somehow that you've become better. If anything, you've just got yourself that many more people that you have to support and take care of and make sure that you are doing that effectively.
Do you think the a leader is the same thing as a manager?
No, I think anybody can be a manager. I don't think anybody can be a leader.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I'm asking this question is I think when you think of what the essence of a manager is, it's somebody who keeps things in order, right? Their job is to put things back in place and make sure people are upholding the culture and the standards that you set forth, right? So the reason why I'm saying this is because I feel like you can kind of check your ego if you remember your job is to keep things organized. And if you focus on managing the process and the standards, I think it kind of will take your ego out of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that that's a very succinct and correct response. I think as long as that you bring an ego, no one's going to want to follow that. No one looks at somebody who's arrogant and says, "Wow, this is the person I want to be." A part of being a true leader is to create an environment that people want to aspire to. That's why I get so frustrated with managers who work themselves into the ground and announce to everybody how many hours that they're working, because all they're doing is guaranteeing that nobody around them wants to do their job. Part of being a leader is to make your life and what you do attractive to others so that they have careers and it helps build the industry.
Yeah, there's a really great book out there, and I think when it comes to like don't become an elitist. It really comes down to check your ego. Don't let your ego overrun, your conscious, like, just don't let that ego swell too much. But there's a book out there called Ego is the Enemy. And I think it's a great book for anybody who's, becoming a manager to check out, because it really, the big takeaway for me in that book is focus on the work. Just do the work. And if you focus on the work and you don't, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you're picking up what I'm putting down right now.
I am. And I believe Nick Saban actually talked about that book in a recent thing that I watched. So you're now the second person that I've heard talking about that exact book. So now I know I have to read it.
Yeah,
but you definitely have to release yourself from feeling like you have any more knowledge than anybody else, because the reality is that you don't.
I love that. And okay, I think we can move on to the second rule, unless there's anything else you want to unpackage with that first rule.
Well, let's move on to number 2.
All right, that second rule we have is avoid discovery-based learning. What do you mean by that?
So I talk a lot about this in the book, about how discovery-based learning works. If you walk into a room of people that don't know you and you're trying to get them to follow or get on your side or help to work together as a team, there is definitely the idea of using discovery-based learning, which is to say, hey, there's a problem. Let's work together to figure out the solution. And even though you might already know the answer, you're allowing other people to come to that solution so that they feel that they have buy-in. The challenge with using discovery-based learning, if you're a freshman manager now managing the people that you just were working with, now they're going to look at you and go, why are you asking me this question? Shouldn't you know? Isn't this because the whole time, that first 90 days, they're judging, why did you get this? Why are you in this position? Why did you choose to do this? And why do you feel that you can tell me what to do? So you've now moved. 10 minutes ago, you might have been their best friend, but now, whether you know it or not, you've become into some sort of weird opposition. And your best move is to avoid all aspects of looking as though that you're incapable, but also not spending a lot of time trying to be everybody's buddy. And because being the buddy manager gets you absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of being reminded of a lesson I picked up when I was training to become a commercial pilot. All the flight instructors would almost all their answer to any question we would ask would be, I don't know, you tell me. And the reason for that was because they wanted us to get to the point where we could be empowered to go find the answer. Because when you're in an airplane by yourself and you have your stack of books next to you and you need the answer for something, you need to know where to find the answer, because you're not going to have a flight instructor to ask. But this point, I guess what I'm saying is I see the benefit in empowering people to find the answer on their own. But at the same time, if you never have the answer, it's going to make you kind of look like somebody who doesn't really know what the hell they're doing, and you're just kind of faking it till you make it. And that's not going to help you get the respect and rapport you need.
Especially if you're a first-time manager and you're managing people who know you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very challenging in that specific instance. Whereas I'm somebody who will absolutely ask questions. I will be the first to admit that I don't know the answer. And sometimes I will even do that in deference to seeing if other people know the answer by admitting that I might not know that, just to empower others to feel like that they're a part of the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you do have to find that balance of letting people know that, listen, like, I don't have to be the person to give you all the answers. The answers you're looking for are in the operations manual. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's that balance of empowering people to teach them how to think for themselves and how to get the answers for themselves. But when do you know it's time to not answer and time to answer? Like, how do you prioritize that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with whether or not you're creating processes that are going to fix something long term versus helping out in the short run. If you find yourself very in the middle of a rush and you need to help seat people and go talk to tables in an unexpected rush, every once in a while, that's fine to roll up your sleeves and go do that. Versus when you find that there's always a push at 7 o'clock and there's always a jam up with the kitchen, then you have to start looking at how to fix those things and to delegate by coming up with answers, because that's truly what a manager is supposed to be doing, is coming up with long-term solutions. Because otherwise everything you're doing is you're just filling in as yet another set of hands, and likely not nearly as skilled as the person who's next to you has been doing it longer.
So when I read this bullet point that you share with us, one of the second of the 6 rules for first time managers, which again is avoid discovery based learning, my initial thought was you want to be as proactive as possible to know and understand the regulations, because it only takes one mistake of doing something illegally once to get in trouble, right? So that was kind of my first impression. So you don't want to learn on the go, because sometimes you learn the hard way, which is when you make the mistake, right? So I guess the question I'm where I'm leading to with this is, where do people go to learn the non-negotiables of being a manager, like the regulatory stuff, like, when it comes to questions around tip pooling and like actually labor and like overworking and sexual harassment and HR and things like that? Is there like a one-stop shop, a place to go where you can kind of get like a list of like just like things you need to know as a manager?
I mean, there are federal websites you can go to go check on. You can look at the EEOC and come up with all of the covered characteristics that you cannot discuss during any sort of part of the hiring, training, employment process. There are definitely, you can go into federal labor and wage websites in order to figure out different hiring processes. But as far as being able to maneuver a lot of the psychology of it, that's kind of one of the reasons I put the book together, was just very simply, a lot of that was just kind of left to my own devices. You terminate somebody and you don't realize that there's a logic and an art to actually doing that. And by and realizing that you don't have to give a litany of reasons for why you're doing something. You're simply communicating information in the most compassionate and empathetic way possible. But no website's going to teach you that. Just trial and error, and hopefully some mentors along the way can help.
Yeah, I think the chapter that you just referenced was chapter 12, how to avoid HR.
Yeah, how to avoid HR is overestimated familiarity. That has everything to do with when you feel that you can have a conversation with somebody or address them in a way that they absolutely do not appreciate. And I just last week, was helping out a restaurant and had this exact same thing happen, to where a manager, somebody got a haircut and he had got this big mustache, and somebody was like, "Hey, what's up, Stash?" And literally that was his boss, and the guy was upset about it. And I happened to walk by and I was like, "What's going on?" He's like, "The manager made fun of my mustache." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And he says, "Yeah, that's I feel really bad about that." And I thought, "Yep, that's because he felt that he was trying to be funny." But the reality is that mustache meant something to him, and he thought he was pulling it off. Now, he wasn't. It was a terrible looking mustache, but it's not your job to say that or to make somebody feel like that at their workplace. So overestimated familiarity has everything to do with communicating with people in a more casual manner than is at all appropriate. And that isn't to say in restaurants that we all don't, we all bust balls. We all give each other nicknames. We all do that, but there has to be that mutual understanding that that's good, or else you're putting yourself at risk.
Yeah. And one of the things I did love about your book is that you do kind of just drop these like little nuggets of like things you literally just cannot say during a job interview that you would have never otherwise known unless somebody told you this and taught you this. And there's things like that scattered throughout the role of a restaurant manager, of things you just cannot do or say when it comes down to just like legal issues, right? So another great reason to pick up this book. But on to the third rule unless there's anything else you want to unpackage with that second rule of
No,
avoiding.
you just keep on going.
All right,
Good job.
we're on number 3, and that is eyes open, mouth closed.
Oh God.
Eyes open, your mouth closed.
And this is not just for freshman managers. This is for every manager in every job ever. When you start a job, your first 30 days, you're going to see 100 things that are wrong. You're going to see how the place is done and go, oh my God, I can't believe that they do this. I can't believe that this is how they're packing their cooler. I can't believe that this is how they're not staggering their labor. It doesn't matter what it is. All of these things are going to come to your head and you're going to think, oh, I can make such a great difference. But the fact is, in the first 30 days, no one's going to listen to you because your job is to figure out how things are being done. But you don't want to lose sight of that, because in 30 days, you're going to forget all that stuff because it's going to feel very, very normal. Day one, you walk in and you see all the backs of the bar stools are scuffed, and you're going to say, geez, why doesn't somebody just go through and take some furniture polish and do something about that? By day 30, you won't care. You will totally forget that. So for the first 30 days, write everything down that you could possibly think of and keep your mouth shut. And then at day 30, ask somebody to sit down, have a conversation, and then pick the top 10 things. Don't go through the litany of the 200. Keep some of those in your back pocket as you're continuing on, but you're going to find those top things that you're going to start tackling and focusing. And if you do that over those next few months, you're going to show your value by saying, I've recognized this, I've got a solution, and this is what we're going to do to change that.
Yeah, I feel like this rule of eyes open, mouth shut, or mouth closed is especially important for a manager who maybe is a first-time manager in a new restaurant. I mean, if they were hired from the outside to come in and be a manager, this is especially important because you don't know the culture, you don't know who's who, you still don't know all the systems and processes and procedures yourself. So especially if you're new to an organization, just like first seek to understand, then seek to be understood. And I think I would even go beyond 30 days. Like there's that onboarding trial period of, shadowing, especially if you're a manager and you have to lead, you have to know that business inside and out.
Yeah. And I mean, and we've all been in that situation to where you have that manager comes in and he immediately starts trash talking. I can't believe that this is how this is. I'm going to totally change this. I'm going to make things different.
Yeah.
And that person sucks.
Yeah.
We know that person.
Yeah. We just had Sanjeev Roston on the show, and I listened to his episode to kind of refresh because we had him back to do some peer mentoring, and he gets into that. Like when you're new to an organization, your job is to just understand as much as possible. First, seek to understand, then seek to be understood. One of those 7 habits of highly effective people, one of my favorite, and you can't overemphasize that. It's a good way to lose friends.
There's no doubt.
Friends at work, but it's a good way to lose followers, I should say.
Yes.
Any other key elements relative to eyes open, mouth closed?
No, I just think that's probably good advice for life, but definitely for management and any position. You can't change culture without understanding what it is first.
We're back and we're moving on to the 4th rule, which is distance yourself socially. This has got to be hard for a lot of people. Why is that hard?
Well, again, especially if you are in a situation to where you're managing people that you used to work alongside, it is so tough to now say, well, yeah, I'm going to put myself in a bad situation if I'm only hanging out with these members of the staff, because you're automatically going to be seen as playing favorites. There's also that desire when you start a new place, even if you don't know everybody, to start hanging out with them socially, because you think that you're breaking down barriers and you're making yourself more approachable. And all of those things are actually undermining you, because they're simply putting you in a situation to where the people who aren't there, whether it's because they weren't invited or because for whatever reason, maybe they don't drink, but you're taking everybody out to a bar and they don't feel comfortable going. Next thing that you're going to run into is people who will think that you're playing favorites. And
Yeah.
you kind of are. And that's a real huge issue. And I know that it's impossible to say, there's so many places that say you're absolutely mandatorily not supposed to hang out with staff. And I would be a huge hypocrite to say that I don't do it, because I absolutely do it. But I make sure that I invite absolutely everybody, front of the house, back of the house, managers, whomever. I make sure to do it days in advance, and I make sure to pay for it. And that's because I don't ever want to be in a position to where somebody picks up my tab, because again, now I've lost power because somebody else is in control of it. So I'll come out, I'll say, hey, everyone, I'll meet you all out for a drink at O'Callahan's. We're all going to go. I'll have 2 rounds. I'll pick up tab, and then I'll say, hey, good luck, everybody. Make it home safe. And then that's it. And
there's some big lessons here that I'm pulling out. If you do want to, for like morale, have an event outside of work, the key elements is make sure you invite everybody. Don't, get into a little bubble, don't segregate yourself into the corner with like the 3 people you like to work with. Make sure you're spreading your attention around everybody, cover the tab, and be gone after 2 drinks is like, I think the big takeaway I got from that. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, the big on after 2 drinks is really the most important, simply because the minute that they can tell stories about you and be like, oh, Ken was hammered. Did you see what he did? Well, good luck in being able to manage them. It just becomes that much more of an issue. And don't get me wrong, after a good long 12, 14-hour days on the floor, a shift drink at the end of the night is nice. And I've been known to have a glass, but I make sure everybody in the restaurant, because it's funny how the bartender will always remember to have a shift drink, and he'll bring one up to the manager, but they might not bring it to the guy who's in dish, who's working hardest to make sure, or the person who's cleaning, or anybody else. And what you're doing is, once again, you're creating environments to where people feel excluded. So if you're going to do those things, include everyone or don't do it at all.
Yeah. And I think I personally lean in the direction of socializing with your team, of making it more intimate. I think the world we live in today is very transactional, and I think that's a lot of what's missing in today's society, is because of legal things. And you gotta be careful what happens outside of work. Like we cut ourselves short, and we don't have as meaningful of a relationship as we could have with the people that we're shoulder to shoulder with every day. But there is that balance, absolutely, that you have to find, where you don't want to become too intimate, but at the same time, you do want your people to know that you care for them and you enjoy them, right? And you want to be able to literally act that out. And actions speak louder than the words, if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
I do. And not to go off on a weird tangent here, but I'm 50 years old, and at this point that'd be me hanging out with 25-year-olds. And so in doing so, there's already that weird sort of level of, hey, I'm trying to be cool and hip and hang out with 25-year-olds. But more importantly, I realize that I have a responsibility as a 50-year-old white male, simply because a lot of us came up in the industry with a lot of people who were pretty brutal and not really welcoming. And I have an absolute responsibility to be, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say mentor, but at least some sort of a role model. So I don't want to be that person who goes out and gets drunk. I don't want to be the person who says something to where it makes somebody feel inappropriate, or made to feel inferior or small. I don't want to be seen as lecturous. I don't want to be that person who overstays their welcome. I want to be the person who very simply is the standard of, hey, you know what? There are a few good restaurant people out there, because as we all know, there are a lot of really not great restaurant people out there.
Yeah. So if you are on the younger spectrum, you're 25 years old, you're great at your job, you get the promotion, you've been working at this place for 3 or 5 years, whatever, and you're friends with everybody. You used to go out all the time and stay for 5 or 6 drinks. How what advice do you have for that person to transition away from that lifestyle, being a part of the party, to now not being able to, now that you're taking on more responsibility? What's that transition like?
If you're unwilling to stop, which when I was made a manager at 29, running a nightclub in Chicago, and every single one of my friends who also worked in the same club, and I didn't stop. I didn't go home after 2 drinks. I realized very quickly that I had to put rules that said, hi, I have to be manager Ken at this point. I have to be able to manage it by addressing certain things. And we have to be very open about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And if you function outside of the boundaries of your position, then I'm going to have to call you out on that. And just because you and I are friends doesn't mean that I can't do that. And that has worked to a certain point, but I spent the majority of my life trying to be liked. And that is such a weakness in management, spending a lot of time really desperately wanting people to like you and think that you're fun and good and, oh, what a nice person. All those things are wonderful, and who wouldn't want to be liked? But it's more important to be respected and to have somebody feel like they're looking out for you professionally, and that they carry themselves in a way to where you're happy to work with them. And the minute you get away from trying to be liked and focus a lot more on what it is to be respected, it changes your entire focus.
Mm. And if you got into it, I might have missed it, but what is the key element, the thing that you can do differently to pivot from focusing on being liked to focus on being respected? What's the difference between being liked and respected?
Being liked is not wanting to do anything that's going to ruffle anybody else's feathers, walking on eggshells, being very cautious of, oh, I want to make absolutely sure that, that somebody else doesn't feel, and it's this way of being timid in your communication. I talk a lot about blunt criticism, and I'm not a person who spends a lot of time providing massively blunt criticism, but I'm surrounded by owners and operators who live in that world of massively blunt criticism of, this is what this is and this is how it is and blank, blank, blank. And I've learned to embrace that a lot more, simply because I know it's honest. And sometimes when we're trying to be nice, we're caging it, and we're not being 100% forthright. So the kindness is never lost, but the honesty is required.
All right. So that wraps up rule number 4, distance yourself socially. Rule number 5, advocate success. What do you mean by that?
Say that again.
I summarized your words. So rule number 5 for you is, don't just be an advocate for staff.
Yes.
The staff, be an advocate for the success of the business.
Okay, correct. So when you become a manager, there's a very big tendency to start going to the owners and saying, oh, like, you know what, we need to make sure that we're doing this for the staff. And you become this like elevated person that is speaking on behalf of the team, which, if there are things that need to be adjusted, of course, there's a value in that. But if you are truly looking at being a manager and being a leader, you have to look at the restaurant as a whole. Because let's say that servers are upset that they don't have bigger sections. Oh my gosh. Well, your challenge is that it's taking 10 minutes for people to get greet times. And even though your staff very well might feel that if we could only, cut 2 or 3 people a day, then we would make more money and that would be better for us. It wouldn't be better for the business necessarily. So you have to think of things in the way of how they function for the business as much as for everyone involved. But that isn't to say that you can't address that exact situation by figuring out who can handle more sections and who cannot, and then figuring out ways to train people in order to become better at what they're doing. So if they were a 4-table section before, how to get them to where that they could take extra tables. There's all of those things are possible, but the the minute you become a manager, you don't just become this mouthpiece for what the staff all rallies to say. And that's not an anti-staff sentiment. You have to think of business as a whole. Staff might want to close at 10 o'clock, but you know that the theater crowd's going to come in at 10:30. And so you're going to stay open simply because you know that the minute that you close early, that theater crowd will never come. So you make those decisions sometimes based on the business versus what the staff wants.
So how do you get the entire staff to advocate for the success of the business?
Like anything else, if you just tell people what to do, they won't do it and they won't find any value to it. So a lot of it is focused on, well, these are the things that we're trying to accomplish, and what is a good timeline to determining whether or not it's going to work. A perfect example is the number of times I've seen people who put together Sunday bloody bars, and they put a huge Bloody Mary mixes, and you can go along and everyone puts on all their different things, and they put out a bloody, and then they market it, come in, get all you can drink Bloody Marys. They do that for like 3 weeks, and then it doesn't work. And then the staff goes, well, this isn't working. And then the manager goes, well, we're losing money. And then they close it and it goes away. Well, you didn't give it any time to actually truly catch to where people go, oh, you know what? Last month I tried that. Maybe I'll try that again in a month or two. So any of these ideas or plans that you're doing, whether it's to extend hours to get to a theater crowd or launch different specials or to engage a happy hour, you can explain with your team the logic of how that's going to work, but also set forth the parameters of understanding that if it's not successful in 3 weeks, we're not going to abandon it. Your minimum for doing anything should be 6 months, because it's going to take that long for people to go, oh yeah, the Sunday brunch over at that place is amazing. You have to go check that out, because by that time it becomes something that people know to be a thing. But without communicating that to staff and just saying, we're going to do this, and they all stand around on Sunday and no one shows up, of course they're going to get discouraged, and of course they're not going to be a part of it.
What's going through my mind listening to you talk is this idea that it's not enough to explain what to do. You have to also explain the why behind it.
Without question.
And I think that the role of the manager, yes, is to keep things in place to manage the systems, the processes, the standards, but it's also the same it's their job to also be the culture carrier, so they are, they embody the core values, the vision, the mission of the restaurant, because the owner injected that into the manager, and now the manager's job is to echo that throughout the staff, right? So be the culture carrier and get excited about all these little things, like the whys, like make it the game of business, right? Like and be the carrier of that mindset of like, hey, we're here to be a better version of ourselves today than we were yesterday, and how can we do that, right? And how can we constantly improve, and how can you be that culture carrier is kind of what's going through my mind.
That's exactly why I'm such a proponent of sharing as much as humanly possible with the staff. I love places that put the P&L on a chalkboard in the middle of the kitchen. I love places that do profit sharing and have an understanding with the staff of exactly what it looks like to run a business and where the challenges are. So then when you're trying things out that maybe don't seem to be working in the beginning, you're doing so because it's an attempt to try to recover and a point to where you're not making any money. And by having that open dialogue and that open communication with your staff, then at the very bare minimum, they understand the reasons for why you're choosing to do those things. And you're not just randomly deciding to be brutal by staying open an hour later. You're doing it with this direct targeting coupled with marketing and all these other things.
We're back, and we're going to bust out the sixth and final rule, then open it up for Q&A. And that last rule is meal etiquette. Have meal etiquette as a manager. What do you mean by that?
So it goes without saying that the most important aspect The thing that your job as a manager is to support your staff, be there for your team, help promote positivity, and give them reason for why they want to be there versus the thousands of other restaurants that are currently hiring. And one of the biggest things that I see all the time that drives me completely insane is managers who will go in and just sit down at the bar and have somebody ring in their manager meal for them, which is completely lazy because you know how to go to a POS and ring in your manager meal, but you don't. You just have somebody else do that for you. And then you eat your meal and then somebody clears your dish for you. You know exactly where the dish pit is, but you don't. You just have somebody do that for you because somehow now that you're a manager, you're entitled to not have to do these things.
You're above that work.
You're
right?
above that. You are above that now, and somebody does that for it. And don't get me wrong, you have a lot of people who are like, "Oh, please, please, I'm happy to do this for you," and you don't let them do it. Bring in your own shit. Go to your own dish pit. Clean up everything. Handle yourself for yourself because they're there to serve the guests. They're not there to serve you. And most importantly, and I still do this to this day with every single restaurant I go to, walk to the chef on duty. I come from the may I speak world. So I walk up and say, "May I speak, chef?" And chef will say yes. And I'll say, "Is it all right that I put in my manager meal?" And I don't ring in anything in any venue that I have without asking chef to make sure, because there's nothing worse than a manager throwing in a manager meal in the middle of a time to where the kitchen might be struggling or might be trying to recover. It just shows massive disrespect. And when you function in those ways to where other people are serving you and other people are clearing your plates and they're cooking your food whenever you want, you're just putting a huge wedge between you and them and saying, "Look, I'm elitist. I have ego." And then there's a very good reason that no one will follow you.
Yeah. Great stuff. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We're going to open it up now. If there's any questions, go ahead and throw up your hand to ask Ken. And it looks like somebody just went mute. Martha, did you want to say something?
No, I really just appreciate a lot of this. I don't know, my husband and I are just talking a lot about how places like Burger King can't find staff members, and it's a lot of it. We're hoping that we won't have any issues finding staff. We're about to open somewhere, but we think a lot of it's because of how their staff is treated. So we're hoping, we've both been at low paying jobs and we've been treated like crap, and we want to try to make it a good place for people to work. So a lot of what you said really resonates.
So if you don't mind my asking, Martha, what type of a place are you all opening?
It's going to be like a fast casual barbecue restaurant.
Ooh, this is going to be good already. And my, because barbecue is the best. Now, that being said, what is the one thing that you learned from bad management that makes you go, "I am not ever going to do that when I have my own restaurant"?
Oh, just like kind of treating staff like they're disposable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge.
It's huge.
My husband worked for a guy who was like a typical restaurant chef who had like the really big, like he would just have like outbursts in the kitchen all the time.
Sure.
And my husband and I are just like, anytime we do hire people to work for us when we get really busy with catering. But it's one thing we when we're in the kitchen together, if you didn't know that we were husband and wife, people wouldn't know we're husband and wife because we just have tasks and just try to do them. I don't know.
I think that
it
you
makes
should
people
just
feel appreciated.
write all those things down. Just write everything that you remember and how that made you feel, because it will help you to be the exact opposite. Scheduling was always my biggest one. Someone who would put out the schedule on Saturday night for Monday, and you had no way to plan your life because they waited till the absolute last minute before giving you your schedule. There's 100 things that you've experienced And the more you go back through your life and realize how you were done wrong, you'll do everybody right. No doubt.
That's great.
I see your hand. Sorry, did I cut you short, Martha?
No, I'm good.
Thank you for your question and your engagement. Cash, you're up.
Hi, Ken. So my question is regarding Rule 4, distance yourself socially. So do you think that it's more based on that even though you make unbiased decisions, the staff will see it as a biased decision where you are, giving more preference to the staff that you're hanging out with rather than the ones you're not?
So the challenge becomes in perception versus intention, because it has never has anything to do with intention. You very well might have said, you know what, it was a really hard night. Let's go next door to the pub. I'll buy everybody around. Let's do that. But then doing that, you might not have invited somebody, or somebody might have left 10 minutes early, or for whatever reason, they now feel excluded, or maybe they didn't work that night. And all you took out everybody on that Tuesday night, but your Wednesday crew, they didn't get to go out. And now it becomes, oh, well, he's got your favorites. Because anytime that you feel that somebody is doing you wrong, whether it's true or not, you're going to look for reasons. And it has nothing to do with your intention of trying to make connections with people and be welcoming. It has to do with the perception of it. And that perception is what ends up getting you into HR.
Follow-up question, Cash?
What if you're in the situation where, like, okay, you do make these decisions to, hang out socially and everything, and everyone is, they're fine if being invited, not being invited. But when it comes down to decisions related to work, do you think those will affect, the perceptions of the decisions you make regarding your work?
I wouldn't say that I would. I would think that I would be able to hang out with everyone socially and it would be fine, because I'm a professional and would make sure that that wouldn't affect anybody else. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's going to be perceived. A quick story that I put in the book was I was never that manager who hugged everybody, but every once in a while you'd have somebody who'd come up to you and they put their arms out and they'd want to give you a hug. And I always felt it was weird to not hug them. So I came up with a rule that said, if you initiate the hug, I'll hug you, but I'm not going to initiate the hug. You have to hug me first. And I thought, that's genius. I'm good. That shouldn't be a problem. And then I got a call from HR and I said, why? Because I'm not forcing hugs on anybody. I'm literally only hugging people that are offering hugs to me. And they said, that's the problem, because somebody who didn't know that they had to offer a hug to you felt like you didn't like them. They thought that you liked everybody that you hugged, but the people that you didn't hug, they felt like you didn't think that they were as good. And I felt about that big, and had nothing to do with my intention. It had everything to do with the perception. So you go out and you drink with a few people. Your intention is to just hang out and make friends. The perception is you've got to click.
Thank you for the great question. Thank you for the answer. Jared, I see you with your hand up. Go for it.
Okay, so my question is, Ken, do you have any advice for temporary managers, people who have to fill the manager role for a predetermined shorter period of time? When I was a few years ago, I was working in a kitchen. I was basically the boss's right-hand man, and he had to get surgery. So for 3 straight weeks, I was there open to close every single day, counting the money, managing people. Is there any differing advice for people in that position?
I love that you asked this question, because my wife works in event sales, and obviously event sales was one of the first things to go away during the pandemic. So she worked floor management, and and she was a fill-in manager. And
like the definition of surprise.
It was 100%. She was, there you go, surprise. It's exactly what she was doing. the advice that I gave her and that I would give to you is own all decisions and don't sidestep it. I would call it like the substitute teacher. We all had that substitute teacher come in and they'd be like, yeah, I'm the sub today. I don't really care. You guys just watch a science film. I don't care. And so everyone went, I don't really give a shit. And it just became that blow off day in school, and everything, went to hell. So if you're that person who just walks in and says, well, I'm just holding it down, I'm doing whatever that person tells me to do, people will walk all over you. They don't listen to you, and you're not learning anything about actually being a manager. And there is a benefit of learning how to manage people, whether it's in a restaurant or any other business. There is definitely that, but you can never do that as long as you're the person who's starting out the conversation by saying, I'm only here a short time and what I say doesn't really matter. So you must own all decisions. And that actually even is a big thing for when you have somebody above you that makes a decision that even if you don't agree with, you own it. And that took a long time for me to understand. An owner would make a decision on how to do stuff, and I would think he would be wrong. And I would want to tell my staff, that owner's wrong, but we have to do this. But the minute I do that, I say, hi, I have no power. So you have to take ownership of decisions. Otherwise, people will look past you.
Awesome stuff. Great question. We have time for one more question. Bob, coming to you.
Hey, Ken, in your travels of management, how many organizations have you run into that actually have a written ops manual?
A written ops manual for managers?
Yeah.
One.
Okay.
Well, I think I can
Okay.
I can think of one, because now I've been with several that have a 13-week program to where you start out in the kitchen and you spend a week in prep, and then you do something in saute, and you work all the way through all the stations, and then by the very end, I've definitely been a part of associations that have that structure, but I can't think of but one that really worked from a standpoint of what it was to touch tables, interact with staff, do the actual day-to-day operations that, and how to manage all the pressures behind it.
Yeah, I can't help but think back to a recent interview I did with Mikey Sorboro from Mikey's Late Night Slice, and a lot of the conversation had to do with building those layers between you and as many layers as possible between you and the work. And I think that this is one of the biggest things people miss is they go through all that energy to develop checklists and processes for, the grill cook, the oven cook, the salad station, the register, and like all the different stations, the server. They have all these checklists and all these systems for all those frontline individuals, but they never do the same thing for management. They never create the checklist for the manager, and they just expect the manager to know. But just like that's just another station in the restaurant where they need checklists. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Bob?
Yeah, remember we were talking about this subject when we were talking to Jen G. In a real company, there's such a thing as a management training program.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes the lower level, let's call it worker bee, and trains them through the process of becoming a manager.
Yeah.
What are the 13 steps of service in regards to management? And the managers have, they're a job description in itself, right? Mm-hmm. Why are they exempt from a training program?
That is a very good question, Bob. There's no doubt. I mean, you can see manuals all the time that explain what a figure eight is and how you're supposed to walk the floor and how you're supposed to use these checklists, but none of it truly focuses on the how to inspire and how to communicate effectively and what to do when you have issues with your staff who feel that their schedules are being done incorrectly, or that they're having other issues. Those aspects are just left up to instinct. And that's always that's tough.
That's the seat of the pants management style.
That's no doubt. You're going to go with the gut. And I mean, and that's where people, I mean, I absolutely have said in a room where somebody had a military tattoo and the person across from him said, you know, and I love the thing. Hey, you're in the military. I was too. And I really appreciate that. And they had this great rapport talking about their military service. But after the interview was over, I had to turn to that manager and say, you can't do that. As much as you would love to make those connections, you can't point, even though something's tattooed on something, unless they bring that up to you. And even that, you really can't touch on it, because military service is part of the EEOC protected class. And that, and the intention is so right. It's thank you for being you, and thank you for your service, and thank you. You're trying so desperately to do the right thing by your gut, but the reality is that you're putting yourself in a bad spot by just not knowing the fundamentals of what you're allowed to ask and not.
I was in a restaurant location. I was CFO of these companies, so I normally didn't go to the locations unless it was new. And I was in a new one, and they had fired the general manager, and they asked me to go there and play general manager. And I said, "You really want me to do that, huh?" Their answer was, "Bob, there's $28,000 a day that goes in cash through that place. We need you to be there."
Right.
I said, "Yeah, okay." So I was there, and I'm doing what I'm doing, and the beverage director comes downstairs, and she's in a panic. I go, whoa, what's the matter? And she's just going, "Oh, we're getting ready for service, and this one's not here, and this one." She's going on and on about this stuff, and I got to get on the floor. And I said, "Can I ask you a couple of questions?" "No, Bob, I really love to talk to you, but I really got to get on the floor. I got to get on the floor." I said, "Explain something to me. Define going on the floor. What does that mean?" You know what the response I got was? "I have to go babysit."
Yeah.
I was looking for something a little more in depth.
A little more inspiring. Like,
Yeah.
I have to go give an engaging pre-shift and then make sure to, you know, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I have to go babysit. And I'm like, boy, that's the wrong attitude to have.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. There are a lot of people who lost a lot of passion for being in this industry. But as I say, the people that are still in this industry now, I've met some really great people who weathered the storm and are here for the right reason. And hopefully there's a new crop of people much like yourself who believe in hospitality and a vision of being welcoming.
Great questions, great engagement. Thank you guys so much. Ken, any final words before we wrap things up and say goodbye?
Just my continued appreciation for you, Eric. It seems every time I have a conversation with you, people talk to me about it, and I love what you do, and I just think that you're exceptional. And anytime that you want to talk, I'm always around.
Thank you so much, Ken. The pleasure is truly mine. And how can we connect with you if we enjoyed today's conversation? If we're interested in getting your book, I know you were giving away a virtual copy of your book. Is that window closed?
It is closed, but I will say that if anybody wants to email me, you can email me at info@Corgan Hospitality, and that's KORGEN Hospitality. And you'll see my website. If you email me there, I'll send you a PDF of it for free. I have no problem in passing it out. I want as many people to have the information as possible. You can also download it on Amazon on Kindle for 99 cents. And that's always, it's always going to be 99 cents. I do that purposely. And then the book is the book, and you can get it from every major bookseller. And there's even an Audible version if you want to hear this voice for 5.5 hours, which not even my wife wants to hear this voice for 5.5 hours. So I can't imagine it, but amazingly enough, a couple hundred people have bought it. So
And we'll link to it in the show notes too. We'll also have Ken's contact information over in the show notes. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/828. We'll have a summary of today's discussion over there, as well as those links and contact information. Ken, there is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.
You as well, Eric. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.